What's something you saw as a kid that looked harmless, but if you witnessed it now it would horrify you? My dad would sometimes act really weird, stumbling and falling around the house, and saying bizarre things. I thought it was fucking hilarious as a kid, that he was just being goofy and silly. I now know he was high as balls on Percocet. Now know he was high as balls on Percocet. Had a jogger get hit by a car outside my house once, when I was about 8 or 9. My nephew came running inside yelling at my parents and my sister to call the ambulance, because he was bleeding pretty badly. I could even see him from our playroom's window and I wondered what he was doing lying on the grass. Turns out he was bleeding out pretty badly, deliriously yelling at my parents when they tried to help. Eventually, an ambulance came and picked him up, but my parents always told me he made it out okay. The day after, in the spot he was found, someone had put a lily in the grass in a vase. It took me longer than I care to admit to figure out he died from the hit and run. I grew up in a tiny country town. When I was about 7 I walked out of our front door one day and spotted a friend of mine who just came out of the small grocery store across the road. As soon as he saw me, he ran across the road towards me and straight into the path of a car. The scene after the accident was horrific. There was blood and spilt milk everywhere over the road. My friend survived, barely. He spent months in the hospital, and when he did come out, the poor guy had to wear a helmet all day. I didn't realize this for a long time, but the accident poor guy had to wear a helmet all day. I didn't realize this for a long time, but the accident obviously caused some brain damage too. His whole personality and temper changed. He became very quick-tempered and constantly out to antagonize everyone. That meant that very quickly no one wanted to hang out with him anymore. Having no friends just made him angrier too. He was constantly fighting with everyone, whether that's other kids in school, teachers, random adults. Of course that was only verbal sparring. Everyone knew that his head injuries meant that he was basically untouchable. It was drilled into us that even just a light knock on the head could kill him. The head could kill him. There's no happy end. I sort of lost contact with him because he missed so much of the school year. When he was in hospital, he had to repeat the year and wasn't in my class anymore. The last I heard was that he died about 10 or so years after the accident. Floodwater. It was fun and games for the kids, and we even splashed around in it, much to the horror of our parents, who immediately scrubbed us down. We didn't understand then, but now, oh wow, sewer, insects, rats, parasites, etc. I survived an armed bank robbery standoff with police when I was a baby. My parents and grandparents told me we got locked in the bank on accident and the fire department had to unlock us. But when I got old enough they told me that it was a bank robbery. I'm still mildly shocked at it, because you never know how those will go. When I was in high school I got off the bus behind a kid I had known since middle school. We were walking to go inside when he just suddenly collapsed in front of me, smacked right into the pavement and started seizing. I knew something was bad wrong, but I thought he would end up being okay. He died in the hospital the next day because of bleeding in his brain. I knew when it happened that it was really fucked up that I saw that, but I never realized how disturbing it is until I got older. Now it really makes me upset. I have memories of him from middle school, and I got older. Now it really makes me upset. I have memories of him from middle school, and he was just such a sweet and kind kid. He died freshman year, and they had a moment of silence for him at our graduation. It was very sad. When I was in 6th grade a girl showed up to school with a Tinkerbell tattoo on her hip. In our child brains, we found this very mature and grown up, that her parents had let a family member tattoo her. Looking back at it now, it's concerning that anyone would sign off on a tattoo for a 10/11-year-old. Same thing happened at my school. In 6th grade a girl came to school, and while changing for gym she showed off a big tattoo that said "Daddy's little girl" on her barely developed breast. She turned out okay, but you can still see the tattoo in pictures she posts on Facebook, and I cringe just thinking about it. In kindergarten my friend Mike's dad used to pick us up, and he always had a cooler of beers on the front seat with him. Would casually sip from cans as he drove. The front seat with him. Would casually sip from cans as he drove. When I was around 5 years old I was in the mall with my mom and her boyfriend. We were in a Radio Shack store, and I was sitting at a computer checking it out. An older man walked up to the computer next to me to look at it, and next thing I knew he collapsed and landed on top of me across my lap. My mother's boyfriend ran over cause he thought he was being weird or something, but apparently he had a heart attack and died. I remember them pulling him off me, and the paramedics showing up and us leaving. A kid fucking sharpened his fingers with an automatic pencil sharpener at grade 2. Everyone didn't know what was going on until the teacher started freaking out. When I was young and my parents were away, I had to sleep at my grandfather's. A sleepover that I always really enjoyed because he spoiled me very much. I also liked the fact that each day my uncle came over for a few hours for some coffee. It was something I usually enjoyed because my uncle and I have the same weird name, so it created a bond between us. Years later, the same uncle called my dad and my aunt and told them my grandfather had sexually abused him as a kid for 16 years. Every time he came by when I was sleeping over, it was to check if my grandfather didn't do something horrifying to me. Until now I never had the change to thank him, as he has a huge trauma and broke all contact with my parents. But when I realized that all that time he was there just to protect me, I couldn't say anything for a few minutes. It hurted him so much to be there. If I would had known then, I would had get my stuff at my grandfather's and run away with my uncle. Your uncle sounds like he's got an excellent soul. I can't imagine how stressful, triggering, and scary it must have been to repeatedly, willingly expose himself to his abuser. It must have been to repeatedly, willingly expose himself to his abuser. It must have terrified him to see you there, always feeling like he was the only thing standing between you and horrific abuse. He's a hero, and he's got the courage of one. I'm so sorry to hear he's endured so much trauma, and I'm very thankful to hear you weren't abused.